CWPA Remote.
First of all, Dave Williamson, thank you very much for joining me. You got a long list of things we're going to be going through, so we'll get to them eventually. But first, we'll start off with you were born and from Miami, Florida, and then now in California. Named best comedian in Miami by the Miami New Times. In
That's
2012,
right.
You opened for comedians like Jim Gaffigan, Louis Black, and Jimmy Fallon. You also founded a comedy festival in El Segundo, I believe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Gundo Comedy Festival. And then, of course, wearing it on your head, graduated from Auburn College of Business in 2000. So first of all, thank you for joining me. Second of all, just kind of going into water polo and into Auburn, just take me through your early life experiences.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for doing research. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I had a little help from Ed Haas and Wikipedia, but yeah, you got a good list going on here.
Yeah, man. I started playing water polo in Miami. I didn't start playing until, well, not organized anyways, until my senior year of high school. So it's kind of crazy that water polo has become such a huge part of my life. I'm in my 40s now, and it's a focal point of my life. It's something I'm so passionate about. And then I went and played since I started playing Soleil, and Florida water polo wasn't quite as big as it is now. So there wasn't as many opportunities for people to go and play polo outside, or collegiately and be discovered. So I went and played a club at Auburn, and I'm grateful every day. Auburn was an awesome place for me to go to school. I'm still a big fan now, as you can tell from the decorations in my room and my hat. And it was a great place for me to play polo too, man. Playing at the club level was a good fit for me. And some of my best friends to this day were from that period of my life.
I was going to say going to Auburn, normally, you have a great sports culture down in Auburn. So, I mean, just going to school there, what was that like? Because, I mean, coming from a kid who went to a school that's not so athletically, shout out to Temple, but not so athletically driven, what was that like, and how was the kind of athletic experience, even on a club level there?
Well, it was cool because the fandom in general, like you're alluding to, was off the charts. Like growing up in Miami, I would go to University of Miami football games, and that was when University of Miami was winning championships every year. And I thought I understood what college football was about, like I did the tailgating. I saw the, championship runs and the loud stadiums. And then I got to Auburn, and they weren't even that good at the time. And it was like people started showing up on campus on Tuesday to tailgate. So it was like next level, man. The games, the atmosphere, SEC football is like nothing in the world. I had no idea until I got there. What was kind of cool about playing a club sport there, especially a sport like water polo, where, in the state of Alabama, people weren't very familiar with it, is there was a little bit of trickle down, We kind of reached out, I remember, to some of the other club sports, like wrestling and rugby. And, we even had an equestrian team at Auburn. And we told them, like, hey, man, we want to support you guys. And if you'll support us, because we know that, people are aware of football, and like even basketball at the time had a hard time getting regular crowds, So it was all about football all the time there. So we started a kind of a little bit of an unofficial alliance with the other club sports, which made it fun. We'd get little crowds to our home tournaments. And one time, it was random. We just somehow put together a good basketball roster in a time where Auburn basketball wasn't really doing that. And we had a player named Chris Porter, who was a big dunker, and Mamadou Njai was a really good center. So we had a number 1 seed in the tournament that year. So we had a good squad. So we were playing Kentucky on ESPN, and it was it was a home game. So there was a sold out basketball game, which was rare. It was a noon game too. It was a day game. Well, we had a home tournament. We had our Chris Young Memorial Water Polo Tournament was something that still goes on today. We host every year, and we were playing Florida in the final. and our game was going to be starting right when the basketball game let out. So we put a big banner up that said free water polo game, Auburn versus Florida, which is a rivalry. Everyone wants to watch that. And we kind of like put signs up funneling people leaving the basketball game into the aquatic center. And then we called up all of our buddies on the wrestling team and the rugby team. We're like, hey, we need you guys to get out there. And we actually had a couple hundred people for this game. And they all brought, signs, and some people already had their face painted from the basketball game. And we beat Florida to win. I think that was the first time we ever won our home tournament ourselves. And I'll never forget that one game in my college career where it felt like I played a popular sport. And people were cheering, or we're fist bumping, and it was great.
And that's something that a lot of clubs, they try to get going now. They try to work with other clubs within the schools and everything. So that's awesome. Normally you don't hear about a couple hundred people migrating from a basketball game right on over and having that. That's an awesome atmosphere to be in.
Sometimes, dude, you just got to ask sometimes, man. Like I remember going into the bookstore and seeing all the football T-shirts, and I asked to talk to the manager of the bookstore, and I said, why can't we have a water polo T-shirt? And they were like, no one's ever asked for one. And I got the other clubs together, and they put together a line of shirts that was rugby, water polo, swimming, all the other sports. And they would have never done it if we didn't ask.
Right. And so I guess you could say that's a big message you want to send out to those club leaders. And that leads me into the next question I was going to have. So if you are a freshman in college again, and you know what you know now, what would you tell yourself about running a club team or just being on it and raising money and promoting?
Man, good question. I would tell myself to not be afraid to try things out in that same regard what I was just talking about. Like things that we got going that I think was pretty impressive for us being college kids at the time was that we did kind of ask things that were unorthodox. We asked the bookstore to carry shirts. We asked the school for money. How can you support us? We asked the school, like, hey, if you're putting the football schedule up in chalk on the window or whatever that stuff they write on the windows with the cafeteria, why can't we do that for our sports? And they let us, so we got a lot of things like that rolling. But I think that you can think even bigger these days. There's no reason why you shouldn't have like your own team transportation, and why you can't have really cool team gear if you reach out to Nike or one of these, whoever sponsors the bigger, just whatever makes what you think makes a sports team legit, go for it, ask for it, bring in a coach to run a clinic. If your school's in the middle of nowhere, so, schools in Los Angeles obviously have access to hiring good coaches. Some school in the middle of Iowa might not have, someone who knows about water polo living on campus, So don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and get creative in ways you could bring in a coach to, even if you can't pay them a salary to coach you could pay them enough to come and run a clinic for a weekend, There's a lot of resources out there now that wasn't there when I was in school, because I graduated in 2000, but now with the internet, obviously there's so many resources out there for getting good coaching and good infrastructure in place to have a successful club.
And now we're going to move on from our water polo world into more specifically targeting you. So let's talk about your comedy here. So you're at Auburn. Did you have any clue that you were going to be doing this when you were there? Was there a moment where it just clicked?
I didn't know that comedy was a job. If I had known comedy was a job, I would have maybe looked into it and figured out what the road to get there was. The cliche answer is I was always kind of the class clown. I always liked being the center of attention and holding court at parties and telling stories. And, I'll tie in water polo for you a little bit. Our water polo team always won the costume contest at the nightclub in town. We were always doing stuff like that. So I think I always had the heart of a stand-up comedian. I just didn't know that stand-up comedy was actually an accessible career. I started writing for a school newspaper. And part of the reason why I started writing for it was actually to write about club sports, because no one wrote articles about club sports. So I approached, and I was a creative writing minor. So I kind of was able to justify it. And I approached this school magazine and said, hey, can I write articles about club sports? And they were like, yeah, sure. No one else wants to do that. So, and I would make them funny. I would always make them funny. And so when I graduated school, I was like, I think I want to be a writer. So I started freelance writing for a lot of different publications. And then I chased my girlfriend, who's now my wife, up to Charlotte, North Carolina. And there was a really cool little sketch comedy club there called The Perch. And she knew I loved comedy, so she took me out for a date night. She's like, you're going to love this place. So we went there, and I watched these people do like a Saturday Night Live type show, but it was live. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. And I approached them after, and I said, hey, can I write for you guys? I'd love to see if I could write sketches. And they're like, well, we just write our own stuff. You got to try out. So I tried out for it. And I got in, and I played Masters water polo there in Charlotte. And all the dudes from the Masters team used to come out to my shows every week. And I started doing sketch comedy every weekend for 2 years, and I loved it. And then when I moved back to Miami, I didn't have time to do sketch comedy, so I kind of transitioned into stand-up comedy.
All right, and so that perfectly leads me into it. So what are the main characteristics of being a stand-up comic? So if you had to compare the two now, how would you compare the two types?
To water polo?
Oh no, just like in the comedy sense, where you were going from sketches and all that to being a stand-up comedian. What are the different things you have to go through in that transition, and how hard is that? Easy?
Yeah. Stand-up comedy, you're all by yourself, man. So you don't have a safety net. With sketch comedy, if you're not feeling it that night, you could just rely on the words that you had, scripted out for you beforehand, right. And the costumes and the other people in your sketch with you might be able to carry you so you don't bomb. Stand-up comedy, if you're not feeling it or if you don't vibe with that audience, you're by yourself up there.
So what do you
just say again?
What do you do in that situation? Like, has that ever happened to you? Hopefully not, but
just like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And at this point in my career, when you're early in your career, you have a smaller sample size to know kind of, hey, man, this is them, not me, or hey, it happens sometimes. You unravel and you make it worse, right?
Yeah.
Once you're experienced at a seasoned comic, if you're not having a great set, you could always at least survive. You know how to just pivot, change direction, maybe abandon your material and start working the crowd, make fun of the fact that you're not doing well, Right. You can always at least survive. And then if you get off, you'll just go, oh, that was a rough one. And then you move on to the next one. Whereas when you're earlier in your career, you might be like, I think I'm going to quit.
Yeah. And so you worked, like I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of names that pop out that you've come across and you've opened for across your career. So, I mean, just if you had to pick one moment that was just like, yeah, that was pretty cool. Like, what would be that moment?
I mean, I was lucky enough to open for Jim Gaffigan one time in Fort Lauderdale, and there was like 4,000 people there. And I walked out. I'd done a few small theater shows at the time, but I'd never done a show that big before. Mm-hmm. So just walking out, and you say your first joke, and it takes longer for the joke to get to the back of the room and to get back up, and the laughs to get up to you. So I said the first joke, and there's like 3, 4, 5 seconds of silence, and I'm like, oh no, this is not going to go well. And then all of a sudden, this wave of laughter just hit me in the face. And I went, whoa, that was an adrenaline rush. And then after you get that first laugh, you're loosey-goosey and you're having fun, It's like getting that first goal in water polo. Once you break the ice, all of a sudden you start just going into muscle memory mode and having fun. But yeah, that was a pretty cool moment, I got to say.
And now you're still kind of creating cool moments just outside a little bit of comedy. So you're getting into podcasts is what I hear.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your podcast game. What do you have going on?
Well, I got 2 podcasts at the time. I didn't want to just do another podcast that had to do with like comedy and just interviewing comedians because it's been done so much. But I have 2 podcasts about niche things that I am really passionate about. One is water polo. And I'm teamed up with Tony Azevedo, who I'm sure anyone who knows our sport is familiar with his name. 5-time Olympian, silver medalist, multiple year team captain, arguably the best water polo player to ever come out of the USA. Awesome dude. And he retired from playing after the last Olympics, a couple of years back. And he's been really active in, the sport since then, and putting together clinics and camps. And he developed something called 6-8 Sports, which is a, infrastructure for athletes to get training tools and data, like stats and stuff. So anyways, I just knew he was really passionate about being active in the water polo world. And because of who he is, I told him, he ran a clinic for the high school kids that I coach here in El Segundo. And I told him, I was like, Tony, man, you got to do a podcast, man. Like you should have that platform to help, grow our sport. And I think people would really love to hear what you have to say about. And he was really interested in it. But he didn't really have the time because he was just traveling and working so hard on so many different things. And so when this whole quarantine stay-at-home order started with the very beginning, when it was like, hey, don't leave your house, I texted Tony on day 2, and I was like, hey man, you ready to podcast yet? And he was like, yeah, I'm sitting in my house, let's do it. So we started it over then, and we've had about 20 episodes come out, and we really enjoy doing it together, and I'm kind of grateful that during this time period it gave us the opportunity to build a foundation for that, because I think it's something we'll continue to grow and stick with to help the sport of water polo. And then my other podcast is called Meet Dave, because I'm a huge barbecue fanatic. And so I interview guys who I look up to in the barbecue world, which works well with my stand-up comedy. See, stand-up comedy, barbecue, and water polo, I try to just intertwine those things as much as I can. When I tour for stand-up comedy, when I used to be able to tour, I used to just find whoever the barbecue guy was in the city, tell him, hey, I'm working at this comedy club. Can I come down during the day and interview for my podcast? They were like, yeah, that'd be cool. So then I get a free barbecue lunch, and then I get to make a new buddy who's someone I respect in the barbecue world, and I invite them out to the show that night. And then I also do that with water polo. When I go somewhere that's got a masters team, I usually look it up and I say, hey, you guys have any practices? And most teams have scrimmages on a Saturday, mornings. So I usually Uber over to the pool and scrimmage and play water polo with whoever the locals are. I've done that in Salt Lake. I've done that in Vegas. I've done that in Indianapolis. I've done that in Atlanta. All these cities who have awesome. Kansas City. I played with those guys once. So all these cities that have awesome masters program, it's really fun to go scrimmage.
Yeah, and that's awesome, and that's something that I'm kind of jealous. You just took everything you like and kind of just went, "Yep, this is pretty cool. I'll take all of this." No,
yeah, you got it, man. Life's too short, dude. You got to lean into the things that make you happy.
Exactly, and you're embodying that right now. Dave Williamson, thank you very much for joining me. And I always ask this one thing during quarantine that's kind of kept at the beginning when we were doing these, I was asking what would you recommend people do to stay, fit or whatever. What's something that you've done? I'm going to switch it up here a little bit. What's something that you've done during the quarantine or during the shutdown or whatever you want to call it that you can take pride in?
In December, I went to a Clippers game with my buddy who's got really good seats for Clippers games. Mm-hmm. And I won a beach cruiser. and I'd always wanted a nice beach cruiser. My little area, Los Angeles here, is obviously a good spot to cruise around, right? Oh, yeah. So I've always wanted one, but I could never justify dropping, $300 on it. And I won it in December. So when the quarantine first hit, man, I was riding my bike like a little kid, just all over town, just trying to get exercise. And and my kids obviously like riding bikes too. So it's a good excuse to go down to the Strand and ride up and down. And but did I miss swimming for the first time in my life? Like, I love water polo, but I hate swimming. But I do it because it's the best way to stay in shape. And for the first time in my life, I was really jonesing for a blue line to stare at going back and forth. But I would just encourage people to do anything they can to move. The kids that I coach, we're encouraging them to get rebounders or just, do all kinds of anything we can think of for them to stay active and throw the ball. And if you need to exercise your mind, You can follow me on Instagram at Dave W Comedy. I've got 2 albums out that you can buy on iTunes or anywhere that you want to buy albums, or subscribe to either of my podcasts, the Tony Azevedo podcast or Meet Dave.
And be sure to do that every single year, guys. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to keep up with Dave. Dave Williamson, thank you very much for taking the time. And best of luck in Meet Dave. And maybe if you make your way up towards Philadelphia, we'll get a Masters game going on up here.
Dude, I was just there. I've been touring with Bert Kreischer, a comedian named Bert Kreischer. Yeah. I've been touring with him doing drive-in movie theaters. And we did a show in the parking lot of where the old vet used to be.
Yeah.
Outside the link. 900 cars.
That had to be quite a sight.
It was awesome. But when I circle back, I'll definitely hit you boys up, man.
All right. Much appreciated. Dave Williamson, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you.